In this video, I'm going to talk about my experience vending and selling games at a local convention, what I learned, how much it costs, and then how much I made at the end. So a little about me. I'm James Quigley. I'm a digital and tabletop game designer. I've self-published 4 RPG Zine games, with the last one currently kind of finishing up, coming out of print. So I've done a lot of making games, but I really wanted to dip my toe into actually kind of going to a convention and selling them in person. So when the opportunity came around to kind of go to a local convention of Southern Fried Game Expo, I really wanted to kind of take the opportunity to learn and start selling. Big things that kind of like drew me to like choosing this convention. Like, one, it was local, so I didn't have to book any hotels or any extra expenses. They had a lower cost indie dev table, so I didn't have to pay like a full kind of expo hall booth cost. I was able to kind of get in for a cheaper rate to kind of go in and try it out and make the rest a little bit less. The convention was overall like gaming adjacent. Southern Fried Game Expo is a lot more of kind of like an arcade and like retro game convention, but like they did have a tabletop game area, so I knew there would be some overlap with kind of, the regular type of customers that I would want and would probably be interested in the type of kind of indie role-playing games I sell. So getting ready for the con, the first time doing this, I wasn't really sure about the space. I might have gotten in my own head, especially, looking at artists that like sell at conventions, that they have these wall of prints, and only having kind of free games in print, I kind of had in my head that I needed to kind of fill up the table more. So I reached out to some other devs and kind of had them ship me their games to sell for them. I basically said, like, you can take whatever money I make from it, give me whatever split you want. I just wanted, the experience and to fill up the table. So I ended up with kind of 8 games to sell. Second off, I needed to make sure I could accept payments. Like, obviously I could have used Venmo or like Cash App or something to like take payments. But I wasn't sure about like what the internet situation at the con would be, and the worst thing in the world for me was thinking about someone coming up to buy a game and like not having Wi-Fi or data and being able to sell it. So I went and set up kind of a POS system through Shopify, because I already have my online store set up with that let me take the online payments, and then also let me kind of easily fulfill on like sending digital PDFs along with all of the books I sold, which was really nice. And then last off, I actually needed to like put together like a real booth setup for the display. The main things I got for my table were like stands that I could actually put the books up on, because I knew that half of kind of like selling was going to be through the art and through the cover that hopefully would draw people in. Shelves for the books that I wasn't gonna have in like direct and physical display, so I would always have kind of enough space without kind of having a row of stands across the table. Packaging in terms of like bags and like plastic covers in case people wanted to, wanted that for any purchase they had. Picture frames for the display, which low-key I just kind of spoinked from Goodwill for, a couple dollars a piece. And then last off, honestly, I didn't need these last 2 things. A kind of a backdrop for behind the table, and then like a banner kind of like showcasing like what the company was and like what we were selling. Like, these weren't necessary, but I feel like they did a good job of kind of like framing the booth and like getting people's eyes kind of drawn over to it. So kind of this is how it kind of ended up looking. You can see the banner behind with the off of the booth setup. The tablecloth was something that was provided by the convention. I did get some like cheap dollar store tablecloths that like were horrible quality, so I'd probably in the future look to get like one of these nice cloth ones. And then on the left, you can see kind of like me using the Goodwill frames to kind of like have the prices up there, standing the books up on the stands so you can kind of like look in and see a display. And then the other books that kind of other devs sent me, I was able to kind of put those up on the display shelf kind of over in the corner. So kind of like looking at like the expenses kind of like going into the convention. Like first off, the convention fee for actually boothing was $150. Other stuff like I very quickly realized is that like a con is expenses also include everything you're gonna spend to like get in and get out of the con, because you're basically gonna be like living there for like 2 to 3 days. So extra expenses being like the garage paying for every day, food, of like running over to the hotel like mini mart and like grabbing like a little snack wrap. And then the money I spent on stuff before the convention. $96 on Amazon for everything I got, $30 at Goodwill in the dollar store, $50 for the Shopify POS system, and then like the $60 at Office Depot to actually print the banner. I have the little star next to these because these are technically things that I'm gonna reuse in the future, like the banner and the display and like the point of sale system. Those are all stuff that like I would have had to buy anyway, and now for every future convention at least I don't have to expend it. But their expenses all the same. And then finally kind of gas going back and forth to the convention. I probably burned like a tank of gas, so kind of divvying that up as like 6 gallons, not too much. And honestly, like if I was going to a convention that was out of town, like I would have to pay for, maybe hotel and a rental and all that. So total expenses going into the convention was like $444, which like low, especially when I started doing the numbers, got me really nervous. I'm like, am I really going to actually make that back from sales? And this is kind of how things happened. Like kind of going through the convention, I adapted and kind of changed out a few different things. Like one thing I tried was kind of do like a buy two get one free with those like little signs you see on the corner that a friend sent down to me to kind of like try to get people to kind of increase their like average cost. I think that kind of worked, although I'd have to like run the numbers specifically. Getting in the flow of like actually initiating a conversation with people who walked by. Like I was definitely very nervous at first, but like especially when I got in the rhythm and realized low key I could have way more conversations or like opportunities to actually sell people if like I actually got their attention and pulled them over to the booth. I'd say like half the time, half of the sales I did were from people that weren't looking at the booth specifically, but like I got their attention and got them over and talking. On the second day, I realized that I really needed to focus more on like demoing the games to like get people like a picture of like what the game is about. So I went home and I kind of grabbed, minis and stuff that I had on hand at my apartment and kind of like set up these like little demos with like you see like the cards and the dice, where basically Afterworld, which is like a card based game, they have a bunch of tags. I have the dice there so they can roll on the table that's out on the book and fill in the cards hypothetically to get a feel for the game. And then the one on the right is Prequel, which is a more tactical game where I kind of, have some minis set up so I can kind of like show them what in a quick example turn would be like. And I feel like this was like a really great way to like get people engaged and like get them like actually, it was a lot easier to explain what the game was about through actually like low-key having them play it versus like me just like rambling at them. On that, like I definitely started like rambling less and then like asking more questions. I felt like when, on the first like day and a half, I felt I was like going into like pitch mode where I would like enter like an NPC cutscene of like monologuing about like what the game was about. And like I could see like their eyes glaze over and they would just shake their head up and down like they understood, but they obviously didn't, and then just say like, okay, cool. Well, thanks for your time, and then leave. So I realized like I'm kind of like just disengaging with them. And so I started like asking more questions of like, what games are they playing? Do they play online or in person? Like what type of genres they like? I kind of started going more like diagnostic mode, and it seemed to like start working out way better into like actually getting people interested about what games they wanted to buy. Like for example, like Prequel is like a tactical one-shot game, but the combat feels very similar to D&D. So like when I found someone whose group largely played like D&D and Pathfinder, like and liked kind of the more dungeon crawly feeling, like filtering them towards prequel and saying like, hey, like if you like, that type of turn-based combat, like prequel is going to be a good game for you. If you're looking for something like fast and free, that's going to be like low stakes, but you can just throw down on a table, Afterworld is maybe more the game for you. And filtering and finding different ways to kind of like pitch to different games. Like we had the one game that I was selling for a friend called Crux, which is like a mountain climbing game. But like you build like a solitaire tower. So I started pitching it as like a puzzle game. And, I had people who came up to the booth who were like, well, I'm not into RPGs, but I am into like crosswords and like paint by numbers and that type of stuff. And like filtering them towards like Crux as like the game for them. Like, or it's like, okay, you can like do that type of thing you already like, but as a story element seemed to work way more. So definitely like leaning in and asking more questions worked out really well. And then finally, like figuring out, as I said, like the why behind each game. Like, why would people be interested in different things? Where it's like, okay, Bloodless is if you like gothic horror or vampires, or I started pitching it as like a racing game because you're racing home before the sun comes up as a vampire. We had the little games, which were like, one was about like fungus being human, and one was about like occultists going crazy. And I started like pitching those as like, hey, do you know someone who likes, botany or likes true crime? Because I felt like there was like a good overlap there. And like between like figuring out kind of how to sell the game and then like what people, asking questions to find about more about like what the background of the people were to make the best, recommendation possible. I thought those two things together like started turning into a lot more sales. Let's break down of the sales kind of overall. So I sold 31 games, and actually sold out of like the free solo games we had, which was really surprising. That came to 577 in sales, which is someone like, who isn't used to like just selling things and like give thing, get money, like was like a wild feeling to just like, make a direct transaction like that. After payouts to other devs, I had to like minus like an extra 20 here because of the bundling of like the small games. I had to like make up that portion of basically giving away someone else's games. It ended up being like $302 in expenses. And then $302 in revenue after selling, paying out the other developers who I was selling for. And then after all expenses, I'm actually minus 142. So two big parts of that is like, one, as I said before, there were a lot of expenses which were like quote unquote like first time convention expenses. So like if I didn't count the stuff that I was probably going to reuse, I'd probably be like positive $64. Additionally, like one of the games that was the highest sale per unit, I actually had no cut on because I was just like selling it, I was selling it because I wanted to sell and like learn. So I just let, that friend developer have no cut on it. So if I had a minimal cut on that, like I feel like the numbers would have been way better. But hypothetically, I end up like plus $64, but obviously that's not counting like the money I have to set aside for like unit costs of like reprinting the books and then like money to set aside for taxes. But overall, like, I mean, I'm pretty happy with that as like a first go at bat. And like there are a number of like really direct things that if I do fix, will make the game, will make that experience way better. So kind of lessons learned, like one, make super good use of load times. I was coming to the convention after work, so I missed load in, which means I wasn't allowed to use like the load in dock, and I had to like lug my boxes basically across the entire convention hall, like in my hands, like sweat coming down like my cheeks and my forehead from like 102-degree heat. Not fun. So definitely like focusing in. It's like, okay, when can I get to the convention, easily get my stuff set up so I can make best use of the time at the convention as possible, will be a big thing I focus on for the future. Test driving the booth before the convention. I see the dyslexia acting up there. You know, some of the stuff, it was a kind of a struggle to set up, and especially with like the banner, the backdrop banner, like it was actually like too big for both the booth and the like the backdrop I had gotten for it. So I had to like come home and like get some like scissors and a knife and like jury rig it to make it smaller. So like actually like, you know, making sure I know how to set my booth up and like what it looks like before I go to the convention, like would have saved me a bunch of time. Drawing people in with callouts, demos, and questions. Like overall, just being, the more proactive I was in talking to people and learning as much about them as possible before I actually recommended them a game or like what would probably suit their interest the best. Like that seemed to work more. So like focusing more as much as possible on like getting to know and like the person who's at my booth and like what they like seems like the best way forward. Next off, kind of being careful about bundling or just bundling my own stuff. I think that, especially because like the game was like, I was only really losing like $3 per sale on like the mini games. Like I think it was positive, but like, especially since you're basically giving away stuff for free, I want to be like super careful if I do that type of stuff in the future. Figuring out a better way to get people to come back. I did this thing where like I made little tokens and like I handed them out to people every time they said they were going to come back or loop back around. And I said like, if you hand me this token back, you'll get like a free $1 discount when you come back and buy something. Out of like the 13 people that said they would come back, only one person actually came back to use the token. So I don't know whether that's a problem overall or whether that's a problem because the tokens I gave were just like shitty and uninteresting, or, you know, whether if there's a better offer to like have people come back around or get them to buy right there. That's something I'm going to have to figure out for the future. But definitely like, you know, if someone says they're going to come back, they're at least a little bit interested. So I'd rather make sure they get what they want before things sell out, because as at least in the trial run of this time, like stuff did sell out. I had one person who was another vendor who, you know, came by the booth on the first day and said like, okay, I'm going to come back and buy this game. And when they came back around on like Sunday to buy that game, I was sold out of it. So I couldn't sell it to them. So making sure people get what they want before it's gone. And then finally, just trying to like making sure that I get a minimum split of everything at my booth, or just like take a flat fee from, you know, developers who are giving me their stuff, just so I can focus on like making back that booth cost as fast as possible. Because low-key, like I'm fine like not getting the best margin on like, you know, selling other people's games, but like it is a priority that I make back the cost of the booth, because as soon as that happens, then that's when it's gravy, baby, and I start actually making money. So that was my experience. It was selling first time at a convention. It was a lot of fun. You know, low-key, I got to introduce a lot of people to games, you know, people who had only played D&D or had only heard about D&D and hadn't heard about like other games. I had like a few people who were like, yeah, I don't really like D&D, and then I got to introduce them to like world building and solo games, and they got like super excited because that seemed way more up their alley than like what D&D is, and that was an absolute blast. And sometimes it's easy to see when you're kind of in your own circles like what the expectation or what everybody knows, but there's a whole world of people that haven't been introduced to things, and that's great. So excited to do this next time. Hope if you watch this video, you took away something to learn. You know, give the video like, comment, subscribe, all the fun jazz, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.